Our top story this half an hour, the impeachment inquiry and the origins of the Russia probe. House Democrats are outlining the next steps for impeachment as House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff is being accused of blocking an impeachment witness from answering questions from Republicans. Congressman Devin Nunes and House Minority Whip Steve Scalise were inside the hearing on Capitol Hill. Here's what they had to say.
To coach the witness, to decide whether or not what we're going to be able to ask the witness. I mean, we don't even get any witnesses at this point, and it doesn't look like we're going to get any ever. But to not let us ask questions, I've never ever had that. And to see someone coach a witness, and this isn't the first time that Schiff's very good at coaching witnesses. Remember, he also met with the whistleblower. So this is just unprecedented.
Joe Biden himself bragged about it. He said he flew over there and he told them that in 6 hours he's leaving with the $1 billion of our money, taxpayer money, if they don't fire the guy that's looking into his son. I mean, my goodness, if that's not a quid pro quo, I don't know what is. But, of course, that's why the Democrats want to throw up all these smoke screens. They don't want you to look over there.
The House plans to hold a vote tomorrow, not on impeachment, but on the resolution and the parameters for moving the impeachment process forward. Joining me right now is the author of the new book on the bestseller list, The Plot Against the President, the true story of how Congressman Devin Nunes uncovered the biggest political scandal in U.S. history. The author, Lee Smith, is joining us right now. Lee, it's great to have you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Maria.
So let me start with the impeachment process, because I think our audience knows how I feel about what went on in 2016, as I've talked about it a lot in these last 3 years.
Yes.
Do you connect any dots with the fact that they are trying hard to come up with something against President Trump right now and completely ignoring what we already know was some wrongdoing by some key players in our intel agencies back in the election year of 2016?
Absolutely. Here's how I see what we're calling the impeachment process inquiry. I see it as a secret ritual conducted by a cult. I mean, they're doing most of this in secret, and I think it's worthwhile thinking of Speaker Pelosi as the high priestess of the cult and Adam Schiff as a high priest of the cult. And the purpose of the cult is to protect the swamp. The swamp and what the swamp has done. And President Trump was sent by the American voter to drain the swamp. And yet it's the role of Madam Pelosi and Mr. Schiff to protect the swamp. What they're talking about, impeachment, is ridiculous. It has bears no connection to reality, just as Russiagate bears no connection to reality.
So just like Steve Scalise just said, look over here, nothing to see over here, because we know that William Barr is now conducting a serious investigation into the origins of the Russia probe, as is John Durham. A former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn now says that the FBI manipulated his 2017 interview. Your new book, The Plot Against the President, says that this was part of a, quote, multifaceted criminal conspiracy to destroy Flynn even before he joined the president's legal team. Take us back to what happened with General Flynn, because he was actually the first person of anybody tied to Donald Trump to be surveilled. I mean, we've talked a lot on this program about George Papadopoulos, about Carter Page, but it was Michael Flynn who was the first person who was surveilled, correct?
Right. That's absolutely correct. Maria, you've had Congressman Nunes on the show often, and you've been covering this story since well before the election. You and I have spoken about this, so you know the details of this story very well. It started in late 2015, early 2016, when they started targeting General Flynn. Then this rolled into a larger operation against the president that started to include, or at that time, candidate Trump, and it started to include other Trump advisors, including the gentleman you named before, Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. And if you look at the specifics of the operation they waged against Trump, we see Ukraine in the middle of that. That's why I believe it's important to look at what's happening now regarding Ukraine and this farcical procedure taking place on the Hill as a continuation. It's not Russia 2.0. It's the same thing. They're continuing the operation. It has an offensive purpose to take down Trump, to protect the swamp, but they're also defending against what they did. As you say, I entirely agree. They're quite concerned about what U.S. Attorney John Durham is doing. They're very concerned about what General Flynn's lawyer Sidney Powell has turned up. And they've been worried all along about what Congressman Nunes and his team have dug up.
They really tried to attack Congressman Nunes from the get-go when he started sniffing around in terms of what's going on, what went on here. For those people who may not be so closely, watching this, and like you are, like I have been as well, in very simple, practical terms, tell us what this cabal of people did and why they did it, beginning at the end of 2015, Lee.
Well, I mean, they targeted the Trump team. I mean, I think the essential point, and one of the important points my book makes, is looking at newly acquired documents. The point that I make, we've talked about the FBI and we've talked about the DOJ and the bad things that people did in law enforcement and the intelligence community, and that's absolutely true. One of the most important things to keep in mind, though, however, is that the primary beneficiary of spying on the Trump campaign, which is what the FBI and DOJ did. They spied on the Trump campaign to try to find an October surprise. The primary beneficiary of that was not the FBI, was not the Department of Justice. It was the Clinton campaign. In effect, the Clinton campaign got the FBI to break into the Trump campaign, to find an October surprise to destroy Trump's candidacy. After the election, that's when they rolled it into a coup.
So this was very simply one political campaign trying to destroy the competitor political campaign. Hillary Clinton trying to destroy Donald Trump, and Hillary had incredible sources and partners because obviously her husband was president, and they have the Clinton machine. How far up the line do you think this goes? Because every time I ask people, and I do this all the time, who do you think the mastermind is? All the attention goes to the CIA, because we know it was really the CIA that would be able to get all of these international diplomats, quote unquote, like Alexander Downer and Joseph Mifsud and, of course, Stefan Halper, to run into Trump campaign people. How far up the ladder do you think it goes? Is it John Brennan? Is it President Obama?
Well, I mean, we know that that U.S. Attorney Durham is certainly looking at the CIA. I imagine we've heard former CIA Director John Brennan say that he's supposed to be interviewed. I make the case in my book, certainly in a chapter that Congressman Nunes, he titled the chapter Obama's Dossier, which is what he calls the intelligence community assessment of January 2017. I mean, Obama asked for this, and Brennan used it as the Steele dossier to set up Donald Trump by claiming that Donald Trump won the presidency, won the election, not by virtue of the vote of the American public, but rather thanks to Vladimir Putin. This has created a tremendous amount of problem, and we even heard former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper say that that intelligence community assessment has led to all of the different things that we've had today, and that was ordered by Barack Obama.
It's pretty extraordinary that this big lie of coordination with Russia is still going on in Hillary Clinton's head. She just called Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset. So she's still trying to sort of, meanwhile, is it fair to say that she actually did collude because her campaign paid for the dossier, and the dossier came from Russia?
I mean, certainly one of the scandals is that they got law enforcement, a certain section of law enforcement, to help them spy on the Trump campaign. I think the real lasting damage that's been done here is that Hillary Clinton paid for a conspiracy theory that has been injected into the American public sphere. We've been living with this for more than 3 years. We've been living in the sick mind of the Clinton campaign and Clinton operatives, and that's what the impeachment process is about. It's a continuation of the sickness that the Clintons put into the American public sphere starting in late 2015, early 2016.
Lee, it's great to have you on the show today. Thanks very much, and congrats on the book. Lee Smith joining us there.